Cool.
I love when it actually works like it's supposed to, rather than, being all jittery. Perfect. Alright, let's do a show.
Yay!
As soon as I let everyone know that we're live.
Get all the.
I don't know if I'm gonna spam all of the discords, that's too much work. I'll just do it in the main community ones, I guess. Just so people know where to find us. I mean, it's gonna be hard to tear everyone away from the Outlaws and the Dynasty.
Right?
Alright, all messages are sent. Alright, let's go ahead and do a show.
Sweet.
Gotta scroll back up. That way we don't have messed up cameras. As much fun as that would be. Alright, let's, yeah, let's do this.
Fair.
Alright, starting out.
You are listening to Heroes Never Die, your one-stop spot for all the latest news, Overwatch League results, and mishaps in Overwatch. Here are your hosts, Totemly Drunk and Adenar.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Heroes Never Die, your one-stop spot for all things Overwatch. I am your host, Totemly Drunk, and tonight on episode 103 we take a look at what's happening inside the game, discuss the latest hot community topics, share our takeaways from Overwatch League Stage 2 Week 4, and preview the remainder of this week's games. But before I get into the news and introduce you to my co-hosts, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who is hanging out in Twitch chat here tonight, and any repeat listeners that we do have. Of course, as always, I do have someone here with me to help break everything down, continuing to ride the momentum on the bus with the Florida Mayhem is Adenar. And Adenar, it's been a pretty damn good week for Florida, despite, not being in the Gladiators, but they had a really good showing.
They have played so much better in the past few weeks that it justifies me being a Florida Mayhem fan. At a certain point, Shanghai at a certain point, they go from lovable loser to just losers. And I didn't want, it happened, and I didn't want the Mayhem to go from lovable losers to Shanghai. And they turned it around, and they've been playing good. They've been getting some quality wins. They've looked a lot better, just as a team as a whole. And I think that a lot of that has to do with Zappis, not his play, but more the attitude that he brings, and then the new coaches and stuff like that that all came in and brought all that. So, yeah, I'm stoked about the Mayhem. I'm top 6. Here we come.
Yeah, as someone that followed Misfits for such a long time, I had fairly high expectations for this team going into the season, because, I know initially I think I pegged him, 6th or 7th overall. But, they just didn't quite live up to that, given some of the performances that we did see early on, and now, they have 3 wins, well, as of last week. Some things did happen this week that we'll talk about on our next show, but, things are definitely uprising for Florida. I mean, they have definitely turned their season around, and who knows, Stage 3, they could potentially be a dark horse team to maybe even make a playoff run if they can continue this momentum that they do have, because really, across the board, their play has been at a higher level than we've seen from them all season long. But let's go ahead and jump into the news from this week. So obviously, guys, the biggest news this week, at least within the game, is definitely the patch that dropped here on March 20th. and that is patch 1.21.0.1, which of course did in fact release Hero 27, Brigitte, so we do have our new support hero in play. And, we already covered, all of her kit and all of that, but they also added the Sombra nerfs that we had mentioned, revolving around attack, where it now has a 2-second cooldown when Sombra is interrupted by damage. And hack is now more consistently interrupted when targets break line of sight. And they did put, a developer comment on this, with the tweaks that they made. And I mentioned that we're also removing the 0.1 second window of time during hack where it couldn't be cancelled via line of sight or with other abilities including Tracer's Recall and Zarya's Particle Barrier, which was originally put in place so the hack wouldn't be interrupted by small objects such as light posts and signs. We've implemented a separate fix for that issue, so she should still be unaffected by those small objects. So, Sombra, we have seen her on ladder, we've seen the old version in the Overwatch League and the newer Sombra in Contenders, and, I have to say, a lot of people were hyping up Sombra, during these buffs, and they're like, okay, we expect a meta shift, and that didn't happen at all. And then, they still go back, they make hack a little bit more easier to deal with when it comes to interruptions, but really, I don't think Sombra is as big of a deal as some of the pros made it out to be. It seemed like upon her buffs, it was just a knee-jerk type reaction, and then her win percentage and her pick rate doesn't reflect, a lot of the thought process that the community had about her, given her OP-ness, as, they had mentioned.
Yeah, no, I mean, from the higher end, they were complaining about Sombra a lot. But this fix isn't for them. This fix is for people more towards my level, the ones who have more troubles dealing with it. Sombra was hyped up, and she is still a very good character in the right hands. But the higher you go up, the easier it is for her to deal with. The lower you go, the harder it is for her to deal, for a team to deal with her. So this will help people who will just turn and spray, essentially, and interrupt the hack that way. And just doing all that stuff. I like it. I wanted to believe the hype that Sombra was going to be the new meta, but realistically, I'm just there's no way they're going to make an invisible character the meta. There's just no way. I don't think Blizzard actually wants Sombra to be meta, because then the exploits happen and all that fun stuff. So I like this. It was needed as a tank main. She was horrible because she could just sit there and kind of spam hack you. So the cooldown is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as we had mentioned prior, they also did add more stuff to the team information screen, where it will now display the ultimate charge for your teammates. Most of this stuff we had already covered, because this is basically straight from PTR to live, so, we're just gonna breeze past it. But, Brigitte is in play, at least in quick play and arcade. And, custom games, she's not yet in competitive, which we will talk about later, because they did kind of make an adjustment to that as well, at least in regards to their approach on how they are handling her in competitive. But, we did mention in the past, on our last episode, about a Brigitte Q&A that they were doing with lead writer Michael Chu, and they actually have the blog post for this Q&A up on the official Overwatch website. And, we didn't get, I'm not gonna say, there wasn't a ton of information here, but we did get, some insight on a few things regarding her story, just, what her daily routine is in life, and how Torbjorn felt about her decision to join Overwatch, kind of seeing how Reinhardt has been, basically. So in regards to the story inspiration for Brigitte, they say Brigitte has been around in story almost since day one. Back when we were developing Reinhardt, we wanted a character who would play Sancho Panza to Reinhardt's Don Quixote. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
A reference the majority of people probably don't get.
So that will probably go over a lot of people. But I have to say, like, I thought it was really interesting that, this has been a character that maybe hasn't been fleshed out entirely to be a playable hero since day one, but, she obviously played a role very early on in the stage of Overwatch.
Yeah. I mean, she was key from what they show us. I mean, she was key in the beginning, kind of being the Reinhardt, follower.
Yeah, the Squire.
The Squire.
In regards to her daily routine, there was one part of this that really surprised me, and it wasn't that, she mainly takes care of Reinhardt's armor. It was the fact that they travel around in a van.
Yeah,
I
that was a
can't
bit weird.
imagine it.
Like, in a world with flying lots of things and Omnics everywhere, I just imagine them hopping into a conversion van,
Mhm.
popping in a DVD, and having Torbjorn drive them down the street.
Yeah. I don't know. It's so hard to place Reinhardt driving a van unless he just has Brigitte driving it. Being the Squire. Who knows? Maybe Brigitte's basically the chauffeur in this situation. I
She's
don't
the
know.
Tavik. She's the Tavik
Yeah.
to Mayhem.
Or
is the driver to Reinhardt.
yeah, or the pusher of the payload like wins from Rogue back when Rogue was still a thing. Yeah, I can see that.
Exactly.
But yeah, also Brigitte and her armor, that's still a work in progress, so she's always trying to make new upgrades and adjustments to her armor, and she trains and spars with Reinhardt every day, but, when all is said and done, at the end of the day, where do they go to, relax and blow off some steam? They go to a pub. That's something we can all agree on.
Yeah, I mean, if you're fighting Omnics all day, you probably want a beer.
I can only imagine the stories that the bartenders hear within the Overwatch world. But, there was one other thing that, they had to throw this in just because of how popular cats are on the internet, and also with Brigitte, and that is that she probably looks a lot at cat hologifs, so holographic gifs, okay, I can see that, or just, cat videos, whatever, whichever way you want to look at it, so really no surprise, they keep trying to throw Jetpack Cat at us, and we probably won't ever see it. Maybe it might. Who knows? I think if we do get Jetpack Cat in any form, it'll probably be like kind of like the Orisa puppy, emote, something like that. I think anything beyond that would be a bit too much to ask for at this point.
Just no Jetpack Cat in any form, ever, ever. Just no. Veto.
Well, we can agree to disagree. Because I want my Rocket Raccoon, essentially, for...
Rocket Raccoon is different than a Jetpack Cat. Rocket Raccoon sounds way cooler.
Fair enough. Well, speaking of, things that are going to be hit in the PTR, this is coming after, the Brigitte patch, and Overwatch developer Jeff Goodman had took to the forums to talk about, character balance, and, kind of like what they're looking at right now. And Goodman says that we're always trying to get ahead of the meta and trying to predict what shifts are likely to take place. In this case, we're seeing some potential for a big tank meta on horizon, especially with Moira just recently being released and how good she is healing multiple tanks. So, he talked about some of the heroes that they're worried about buffing until, we see some sort of shift. And he specifically name-dropped Roadhog, Zarya, and Ana. So, the heroes that they are going to be looking at here very soon, maybe as soon as, later this week, are Reaper and Mei. And yeah, the reason why they're looking at those two in particular is because if the meta is going to shift based on how they predict, they will be the ones to help kind of deal with that if that meta is to come around. And there's been a lot of talk about, okay, well, what could we see from Mei and Reaper to make them more viable? And the two main ones are, for Mei, being able to freeze multiple targets with her primary fire. And then for Reaper, to have the ability to cancel Wraith Form. So, I don't know how you feel about both of those, or if you strongly disagree with one of them in particular, but Like, I think the Reaper one would be absolutely great, just in the sense that, you know, you would have more of the element of surprise, rather than being able to perfectly time out, you know, when Wraith form is going to come up. But the May one is definitely one, and I think if that does come to fruition, is going to piss a lot of people off.
Yep. The Reaper one, I mean, the two that jumped out to me and I had heard and thought of was the Wraith form. The other one is reduce the spread of his shotgun blast. Just, you know, more concentrated damage from maybe a tad bit farther away. That could help with viability of him not having to be like next to the tank shooting him in the head. But I think either one of those would be fine for Reaper. The May one, I do not like. Now, there's a version of it that I do like. I don't think May should be able to freeze more than one person with her main ability, her main attack. I do think she should be able to freeze someone with her main one person, and then kind of, it's almost like trickle some of the slowness off of to the side. So like when you're freezing someone, people around them, they don't get froze, but they get slowed. So their movement speed is completely reduced to where they're almost like at a snail pace, or they have to get out of the area and get away from May. That will give her more of a zoning tool instead of just freezing, like going into a group freezing 2 or 3 of them with her, you know, primary fire, which would be ridiculous. But I like the idea of freezing the one still and then slowing the people around them.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's go ahead and shift over towards what's going on right now in competitive Overwatch. So, you know, Overwatch League, we are entering the final week of Stage 2. And, you know, we have Stage 3 and Stage 4 tickets up, and with that, they do offer some season ticket packages. So, Blizzard is now offering a $600 season pass for the remainder of Season 1. Basically, this pass will offer additional perks for, like, early access to playoff and final tickets, and you'll also get a signed Soldier 76 statue from a team of your choosing. So, you know, as I mentioned, playoff tickets are not included in this deal. But you'll have an earlier chance, you know, compared to the general public, in order to pick up, you know, playoffs and, you know, the finals and all that good stuff. But that is not the only pass that they did offer, and they also included a $100 pass, which is only good for people that are wanting to attend all of the Wednesday and Thursday games. So, you know, we got season pass tickets now. We still have single day tickets for, you know, the remainder of the stage to purchase. But if you look at the price point, that's really what I wanted to talk about. So, you know, $600 for the season pass. If you compare that to, let's say, NFL, I think, like, on average, the NFL season ticket price was, like, $172 a game.
Per seat?
I think so.
Oh yeah, no.
Yeah,
I'm on the waiting list.
Oh, are you? Okay.
I've been on the waiting list for 31 years for season tickets.
Okay, so
yeah.
To further drive this point home, okay, so we're looking at $172 per game per seat, basically, for NFL, and your home team plays, you know, 8 times in their stadium out of that season. So based on that rate, you would be spending $1,376. Now, when you compare that to the Overwatch League, you know, even with half of a season, you're paying to see your team play 10 times, at least, you know, assuming they don't make a playoff run, on top of getting to see all of the other games, you know, and that Soldier 76 statue. I mean, we can't really put a value on that just because we don't know if it's just, like, the Collector's Edition one that came with the game, or if it's a different one. But, I mean, that does have some value, but it's hard to, like, actually put a value on it in itself. But, like, if you just look at the price point, like, when you compare the two numbers, you know, that's a pretty drastic difference when you consider, you know, how much more entertainment, well, at least, like, total time being at that, you know, venue you're going to be getting, even with half of a season. So $600 to me doesn't seem like that big of a stretch, but I know a lot of people are just kind of iffy on it, just because, like, yes, you know, the season Ticket Pass does kind of like cater towards those that are local to the region, because for me, like, I wouldn't be dropping 600 because I would have to, add on airfare and hotel and all those accommodations, and it's out of the question for me. But at $600, if you're a local, I would absolutely jump at that price point.
I mean, I would already have given them my $600
Hmm.
if I lived within an hour and a half of there. Because I mean, I'd probably go at minimum once a week, probably twice, outside shot 3 times. So like, I have no problem with this price point. For the $600, like you said, you get a lot. You get the signed soldier statue, which, I mean, to put a dollar amount on it, like you said, is insane. But yeah, first number that jumped off my head, 100 to 150 bucks right there.
Hmm.
Because you know that, we can't put a price on it, but once people get them and put them on eBay, there will be a price on them. And I'm thinking 100, 150 bucks for that. And then to get all the games outside of the playoffs for the entire thing is just, it's good value. It's just, people don't want to drop that much money on one thing at a time. And a lot of people would prefer to drop the $20, $30 for each individual day they go, when in reality, people who go there a lot probably should buy this $600 packet. And I mean, I don't know how much longer they can do this, because I mean, they did have plans on, having teams move around back to their home cities. So like, you're not going to pay, you may not pay $600 to see, one match a week in your hometown. Like when, Houston and LA play, and they play in Houston, you're going to pay $600 to see that game that week, then their home game the next week, and then the home game the next week. And that's if they play 3 home games a stage, because you just never know with having to travel internationally and stuff like that. So they're testing the market to see how much they can get out of the fans at this point.
Right.
And they started off, I think this is low, and I think they're just going to get higher.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. But in regards to like home stadiums, I don't think we're going to be there until minimum, as we mentioned, season 3. So this is something that we're going to see for at least another season. And I'm assuming we're going to get like an overall season package for season 2, and who knows what that price point is going to look like once we do get there. But the $100 pass just for the weekday ones is a pretty good value. I mean, weekday tickets are usually $20. I mean, you have to go 5 times in 2 stages to really make value of that dollar amount. So, that's really not a whole lot when you figure that, that's 10 weeks to go see, 5 days worth of Overwatch League. So it's really not that bad, as Bob is spamming our chat. So, I mean, that one too, I think in itself is a really good value as well. And, I know some people might not be able to justify spending $600, but the $100 price point also is, equally as good as well.
Yeah, the $100 one is insane. Like, if you're out there, I mean, $100 for unlimited Wednesday and Thursday night games, you have to take care of that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't get the statue, but big whoop. $100 all the Wednesday and Thursday matches. So yeah, do that definitely.
Yeah, Bob's asking if they have the ability to sell tickets if it's based on a badge or just tickets. Bob, they haven't really said anything about that, so that really is like the biggest question mark. Because if you have the ability to sell the tickets, then you could sell them at face value and, kind of recoup some of your money, or just, try to make some money, whatever. But
yeah, that's what I'm actually doing in Vegas. I actually put in to buy Las Vegas Raider tickets, season tickets, and I'm just going to buy them. And then when I'm out in Vegas, just go to the Raiders game and then just sell off the rest of the tickets to just kind of make my money back. Like, that's basically all I'm doing it for, so.
Yeah, and especially when it comes to, the playoff stuff, since you will have early access to that, because those are going to be a hot commodity once we get to, the end of the stage.
Yeah, now Bob's saying in chat, yeah, because you make some money doing it with the stage finals and stuff. Remember, the finals are not included.
Right.
So you still have to pay extra for the finals. You'll just get them before everyone else. So you still pay and sell those tickets.
Yep, so looking at other Overwatch League news, we did have some debuts this current week. And, I don't want to go, too heavy into detail about this, just because these are matches that we will cover on, episode 104. But, for those that don't know, we did have some debuts this week, and that includes Sinatraa debuting for the San Francisco Shock, as well as Fearless and Ado for the Shanghai Dragons. So, let's ask ourselves, what do these players bring to their respective teams, and which of them do we think is going to have the biggest impact on their roster? So, Sinatraa, I've already been getting into some pretty heated conversations over on Twitter and on other podcasts about Sinatraa and my feelings about him as a player, but what does he bring to the Shock? I feel like overall, when you compare him to Dante on the Tracer, I think Sinatraa mechanically is the better of the two. The issue is, Sinatraa doesn't have the same experience as Dante when it comes to playing on the stage, because going back to, Sinatraa playing on the World Cup, that was his first taste of LAN experience, and now he's just kind of getting thrown into the deep end. And, he has the only, public contract that is known for the Overwatch League. He's making 150 grand, and there was an awesome tweet that I don't know if I posted it in our Discord, but someone had messaged after the Shock and the Mayhem game this week. It was a picture of, a wooden L that cost $150,000, and then it had, the San Francisco Shock, lettering on it, which was fantastic. So, paying 150 grand for an L, that was a pretty good tweet. But Sinatraa, I think out of the two, is the better Tracer player, but I don't think he will have the impact that a lot of people are thinking he's going to have, because there's a lot of hype around Sinatraa. And I'm not sipping on the Kool-Aid, I'm not buying into the hype. And until he's able to prove himself against the top Tracers in the world, not just the NA Tracers, I want to mind you, because a lot of people are like, oh, well, he's the best Tracer in NA, but really, that's like saying, oh, well, I'm the best Tracer on the Houston Outlaws. That really doesn't mean anything. You have to be able to go toe-to-toe with the elite Tracers, and there really aren't any in NA, so he needs to get, a little bit more time against the elite Tracers to really, justify the hype train, I think.
I mean, people love Sinatraa because he's flashy. They remember him from the World Cup. He can pull off some big plays, but he can also pull off some crappy plays. I think Swoosh actually on his stream after the match that they had, he was talking to him and were you guys worried about him at all? And he's like, no. He's just like, he has moves that set him the example he uses, Sinatraa is known for using a triple blink, trying one clip of support, and then recall.
Right.
And he's like, most of the time that doesn't work. But what it does do is if we communicate, we can just be like, okay, now we know the Tracer is way far away with one blink, and we can move forward and not have to worry about the Tracer as much. So he's got an aggressive play style. I mean, honestly, Sinatraa, his personality kind of fits on the Dallas Fuel a little better than the San Francisco Shock. I'm not on the hype train with him. I'm with you, Totem. I think he's good. I think he's better than Dante. I don't think he's top 5 Tracer in the Overwatch League. Personally, that's just me. I think he's going to be good, but I think he's overrated. Ridiculously overrated. So.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of compare it to, the thoughts that I had with Clockwork from the Houston Outlaws going into the Overwatch League, because Clockwork was someone that was kind of in a similar role, because, yes, he too is a Tracer specialist, and, he just, he never really played at a consistent level, and now, he's gotten some more time in the Overwatch League. He has been playing probably the better Tracer on the Houston Outlaws. I mean, take that for what it is worth, given their problems with Tracer, which we will talk about here later on in the show. But, I was very critical on him. I didn't know whether or not, that he really deserved a spot in the Overwatch League, and he has slowly earned my trust back. And who knows, Sinatraa might be the same, but the issue at the end of the day is, when it comes to Sinatraa, based off of what we've seen, it's hard not to just look back at the World Cup and the comments that he made after losing the Tracer duel, because, the manner in which he did it was really what, irritated me. If he just, flat out said, yeah, I just got outplayed, I went up against one of the elite Tracers, anything like that, or showed some mores of, respect, I would have no issues, but he didn't do that, and he has, that snarky type of attitude, and you're looking at the Shock. That is a team that has, I'm not gonna call it a false sense of bravado, but that team does have a lot of bravado about them. And, Sinatraa just needs to be able to back that up, and he just hasn't done that as of yet. But, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I'm like, oh god, is Totem gonna go on about these flippin' Discord orb comments again? But I was gonna say another thing with Sinatraa is he's just so. I mean, what was it? NBC was following him around, recording him. It's like, how do I put this nicely without sounding like an a-hole? He's like a less abusive XQC. He's got the flair, he gets the attention of the people, he's got skill, but is he actually good for your team? And I don't know if Sinatra's good for your team. I think Sinatraa has a superiority complex about him, and I think the San Francisco Shock are feeding into it. Having a countdown to when Sinatraa comes in and play. Well, you had a good Tracer and Dante played. It's not like you're the Houston Outlaws and have to play 4 different people on Tracer to find one that's acceptable. You had Dante, who was doing good on Tracer, but the whole meanwhile he's playing that, the team's, 10 days till Sinatraa, 9 days, check him out on NBC. Here's video of his birthday party when he could start playing in the Overwatch League. They're feeding into his ego. And I don't see it ending well.
Alright, well, looking at the Shanghai Dragons, we do have 2 of the Korean Dragons that had stepped in this week, being Fearless and Otto. So, we have Fearless, who was the main tank for Element Mystic, who, if you guys aren't watching Korean contenders, you can see Element Mystic tearing things up there. And Otto is the projectile specialist, mainly playing Genji. So, these are 2 big pieces for the Dragons. Obviously, Kagiri is coming in during Stage 3, along with a new coach, and Sky, who is one of the support players. So, we got a lot of new pieces coming into the Shanghai Dragons really soon, and basically, Fearless and Otto basically came in, they flew in, and they played immediately after, only 1 or 2 days worth of scrimmages. So, I know during the games this week, they were talking a lot about, well, we can't really expect too much just because it is really early on. They could be jet-lagged. They haven't had the scrim time with the team. And we do know, there are going to be communication errors from the start anyway, just because, you have Koreans playing with Chinese players, and, they don't all speak the same language. That being said, what are your expectations from that combo between having, your Winston player and a Genji, because we've seen how potent that synergy can be within the Overwatch League itself?
I mean, I really, if I was to pick one team to bounce back in the next stage, it won't be the Mayhem. It will actually be the Dragons. I love what they've picked up. I really like Addo. I love his play on Genji, and pairing him up with the Winston and possibly even Zarya when Grigori comes in. Whatever tank she will play.
Primarily be D.Va.
Primarily. She's just most people know her from her insane Zarya player. But I mean, with D.Va, you're bringing 3 key elements to a team right there. You got your Winston, your Genji, your D.Va. You're just okay, Now we just need some healers and we need some support. And then they're bringing in support too. They're basically just redoing the whole team, which they need to do because, well, they can't win with the team they have. And I think they're just kind of rebranding themselves, kind of like Dallas should be doing almost at this point. But, I mean, it's smart to just bring in an all-Korean team. I mean, if all else fails, just bring in a Korean team.
Yeah, I mean, well, they are picking up pieces for basically, like, every part of the lineup, basically. So, whether or not Dia and Undead come back to the lineup, because I know they're having some visa issues, because the visas that they did get were basically one-time use, and they're back in China right now. They're, based on the TMZ-esque reports that we've seen on Undead, who knows if he'll come back. But that is a story for another time. But regardless, Shanghai at least has made an attempt to right the ship, and as soon as Gaguri is coming in, I expect them to see even more fanfare than what they've already been shown, at least on the Twitch stuff. But who knows, maybe they'll actually be starting to put in the money with the Twitch bits and the merchandising and all of that good stuff. But really exciting times for Shanghai, at least moving forward. So I am really anxious to see how they are going to gel together, or just how quickly they'll be able to turn things around, given the fact that, they still have not won a game yet so far in the Overwatch League. But, moving on, we did have an interview that was done with Invin, with Overwatch League Commissioner Nate Nanzer, and, they touched up on quite a few topics, but I figured we'd talk about mostly the stuff that just deals with the Overwatch League, because, that's primarily what we do cover in regards to esports here. And, they kind of touched up on, different topics, but, the real reason why Nanzer was there is, scouting, different venues for potential future events in Korea. Which, if you've watched the Korean scene in Overwatch, you would know that, it's a pretty big game over in Korea. And we all saw how popular Apex was, so Korea is, a staple of the competitive scene, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's, if you're not tapping into Korea for Overwatch League and Overwatch and for contenders, then you might as well just not have an Overwatch League at this point. So... yeah, it was an interesting interview that they had.
I mean, so many other players are Korean too, so bear that in mind. But, they did touch up on a few things, but let's start with the Academy teams. So, they had mentioned about Academy teams being an obligation for the teams, and Answer says that we don't have any plans to do that now, but never say never. I think it will naturally happen. Okay, so, as of right now, we have 9 of the 12 Overwatch League teams fielding an Academy team. So there's 3 teams that don't have one, and, here's a big debate with this. Right now, based off of how the signings work when you are calling someone up from contenders, basically, if they are in your Academy team, you do not have first dibs on the sign-in. Basically, that player is free to be approached by any team out there within the Overwatch League. They just have to play... they have to pay a flat fee of, 25% of the annual contract, and on top of, any sort of sign-in bonus. So, with that in mind, Edinar, do you think that we will see these other teams, field and Academy teams, despite knowing that they won't have first dibs, or... is that potentially something that we could see a change of ruling on, where they will be able to pull up from their farm system and maybe be able to match or give a better offer than whoever the opponent is at that point?
Okay, so with the rule set, I'll answer it first. With the rule set that they have right now, no chance that that the teams that don't have a contenders team make a team. Because there's no incentive for them to have one at this point. I mean, like you said, they can basically just go out and sign whoever they feel like and not have to pay for, a contender's team. Now, it can also be said, and it's very similar to how it's kind of like college basketball. As odd as that sounds. So, what happens with basketball is, these high schoolers play on these, special teams in high school. I forget the name of them, but they're sponsored by, Nike, Adidas, stuff like that.
Okay.
And there's certain colleges that Nike wants them to go to because that's their school. Adidas wants them to go to this school. So they can go to any school they want. So any school can get these kids to come play basketball, but Nike might try and influence them by giving them a bunch of free shoes and sponsoring them when they're in high school to get them to go to their colleges. I think this is kind of similar to that, like with the Philadelphia Contenders team. It's like, yeah, you don't have to go to the Fusion, but the Fusion have been there for you. They've given you all these perks. You have backing, but is that really going to stop someone from paying an extra $20,000 for, a really good player? Like, I don't think so. So I don't think the way it's set up right now is going to continue. I just don't. I think they're going to switch over to almost a farm system. Like, you sign players, they're in your farm system, they're your players. You can trade them, do whatever, but they are kind of, for lack of better terminology, your property. Like you have in baseball, you have the minor leagues. No other team can go out and sign them, but you can trade them, you can cut them, you can release them. And that's, I think, what will happen. And once you see that, then it will become mandatory for every team to have a Contenders team, and maybe even multiple. Like, as weird as that sounds, like they could have a Korean Contenders team and an EU Contenders team and an American Contenders team. So they have their bases covered from all the regions. So I do see that coming, not anytime soon. And until that's announced, I don't think you're going to see the 3 remaining teams have Contenders teams.
Yeah, and just based on how the sign-in, rulings kind of go right now, that's why we don't see Flower playing for XL2, which is New York's academy team, because they don't want someone to just come in and outright take their, the person that's the star player that is waiting in the shadows, basically, and there's a lot of hype around that player. So, that's why we won't see. That's why we won't see Flower until Season 2 of the Overwatch League, despite, Contenders being a good opportunity for him to get, some more playtime under his belt against, some pretty decent competition. But, you don't want to lose your star player to someone else, so, you might as well just sit him until it's time to call him up.
Now, can he scrim with New York? Is he allowed to, scrim and practice with them, even though he's not of age?
I don't think so.
Can he still... Okay. Well, then that sucks. Because he can't, practice, really, then.
Yeah, and we can't call it competitive ladder practice.
Yeah, no, it's just toxic after toxic with a side of toxic. But, I mean, yeah, it's detrimental to the player base if they're not even allowed to scrim with them. Because your players, you basically have to sit them on the bench for 6 months to a year, hoping that, hey, you're not going to be playing in Contenders, you're not going to be playing in Overwatch, don't get rusty, because you're not allowed to practice with us either. So, I mean, if they can't scrim with them, they need to change that. If they're under contract with them, they should be able to scrim, even if they're under 18, but they can't actually compete on the stage until they're 18.
Absolutely. So they also did mention, Overwatch League being held in other places, and Answer says that the plan is to have every match in Overwatch League be played in the home city. I don't have anything to share on what we're going to do next year, maybe in a few years. So again, this is something that we brought up. We're looking at a few years out from having home cities, and, based off of this statement, I think it's pretty safe to say that Season 2 is more than likely going to be based in LA at, the Blizzard Arena again. And, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No.
But, having all of these teams finding, a home arena is going to take time. They need to find the deals, they need to find the place, whether it's they need to find a stadium that's already there or they need to build one. We have seen new esports arenas opening up. I know Luxor, in Las Vegas was opening up an esports arena this week. It was opened by the same guys that have one. I'm pretty sure there's one in LA as well, if I'm not mistaken. Or it was somewhere in Cali.
I think they turned the old Carrot Top venue into esports arena. I stay
Gotcha.
at Windsor from time to time.
Yeah, there was also
Wonder.
one getting built in Arlington, which could be the host for the Dallas Fuel or Houston Outlaws. More than likely, the Dallas Fuel is the two. You know, that's assuming that that dumpster fire continues.
feel like feel like his Dallas Fuel's home stadium is just gonna be all of Twitch.
Yeah,
Like,
pretty much.
you're like, who are the top 6 streamers? Okay, we're just gonna have it on their streams, and that's gonna be our matches.
Mm-hmm. I can see that. But yeah, I mean, we're looking at least season 3 before we start to see home cities, and to that extent, like, it might not be, you know, everything being like, okay, your team is playing at home, and then, you know, you're traveling. It might just be, we have a host city, but we'll just have them in different locations. That way you're just not all in one spot throughout the entire season. So we don't know quite what to expect from that, but, you know, regardless,
It
the timetable looks like we're probably 2-3 seasons out.
All right, so I'm very interested in how they can make this work.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no other real sport out there or organization like this that does as much inter-country like competition. So like if Houston has to go to Seoul, like if the US teams have to go to Seoul, then they're probably going to be gone for like 2-ish weeks.
Right.
So they're going to be playing in Seoul, then they're going to be going to Shanghai. I mean, they'll probably be playing Seoul and Shanghai each for 2 weeks straight and then come back. As weird, because like you're not going to just fly them over there for a Seoul match, then fly them back to the US. That's just cruel to make them fly. But and having the inter-country like competition, I can't think of another sport that does it. Like, yeah. Oh. Next week we'll talk about this.
Yep.
Something just happened. We'll talk about it next week. I'm sorry, Totem.
Shit happens. All right. Well, okay. So moving on, like they talked about, you know, reaching franchise in, and he says like the goal is to have around 28 teams around the world. Okay, so 28 teams. That is the end goal for the Overwatch League. How do you feel about that number? Because when I first heard this, I was kind of floored by it. I feel like, well, we have 12 right now. I mean, 28 is pretty lofty, but like when you compare that to like traditional sports, a lot of like the sports leagues out there have like 30, 31 teams around that range. So 28 doesn't seem too far-fetched, but when it's this early on and we don't have a proven ecosystem, at least for the tier 2 scene, that number just seems kind of not obtainable right now.
No. I don't think it's obtainable in the next 10 years. Like I think the Overwatch League needs to have like a set system, almost like, okay, you know, you're not going to buy into this and then immediately lose money for the next 5 years. You need to have stability. I think 16 to 20 is probably much more realistic in the next 5-year range. I think we'll be at 16 for season 2, maybe 20 by season 3, and then I think after that we'll probably be on a small hiatus of adding new teams so they can get this kind of figured out. Now, I think it would be better for the league for them to get more Asian teams. As bad as this sounds, you need to thin out the Korean players. Like, you can't, because Korean players they're hands down better than American players and EU players at this game. That's kind of obvious from the top 3 teams in the Overwatch League right now. More Korean teams means, you know, you might not have the Tobis, Ray Jae-hongs, Manu, and, you know, all them all on one team. They'll be on 2 teams, 3 teams. They'll be spread out. So the talent base is going to be spread out. So every stage, every season, you're not going to have the same teams dominating over and over and over again. You're going to have, you know, New York win this year, and then next year you're going to have the LA Valiant, and then the year after you're going to have, you know, whatever Russian, you know, at Moscow or whatever Russian city they decide. Or, you know what I mean? Like, you're going to have it more variety. 28 though, that's a lot. Like, I think 24 would probably be in 10 years would be the max, and that's if this thing lasts 10 years. For the last 10 years, it's a miracle, I think. So yeah, I think he's aiming high. I don't think you're gonna get that high.
Yeah, it's pretty ambitious of a goal. But you know, who knows? Like, we have seen a ton of like surplus of new talent cropping up a lot, so there might be the the player base to support that many teams, but you know, it's all gonna be based on the stability of the infrastructure for the tier 2 scene and just how that, supplements into, tier 1 essentially within the Overwatch League. So, I think, next season we're likely going to see probably 4 new teams would be my guess. We'll be at 16. But beyond that, it's gonna be interesting to kind of just keep an eye on just how aggressive the expansion is going to be, and what markets are going to come into play. Obviously, the big factor next season is definitely trying to get more teams in Europe and Asia,
And Chicago.
and hopefully Chicago. I mean, that's really the most important of all of it, just so we have something local for future events.
Mm-hmm. Now, one thing I will say is if once they start getting up to 16, 20 teams, I don't know if this is something on their radar, but I think it's something they need to do for the overall health of the league, is they need to implement a draft.
Mhm.
Like, once you get up to 16, 20 teams, you're just going to have, and it's just a free-for-all for all the players who aren't in the Overwatch League. Just go sign whoever you want, doesn't matter. The same teams are going to sign those players and keep winning and keep winning and keep winning. If you implement a draft, then somebody like Shanghai or the Mayhem or Shock or Houston or somebody like that can go out and, draft Flower, for instance, number 1, and then they can start building around Flower. Like, they can start doing that instead of Flower going to New York Excelsior where they're already number 1, and then they get the best free agent player, and they just the good teams just get better while the bad teams can't really find anybody.
Mhm.
So I think a draft, and I mean, how fun would an actual like online draft of Overwatch League players be? I would watch that. I'd watch the hell out of that.
Right. And I mean, the same thing can kind of be said, like, if, like, the new teams that are coming in are going to be, like, expansion-type teams, where they're basically able to pick up players from, current teams as well, but, maybe some of them, have, something in their contract where they can't be, implemented in that. I mean, that is also an option, too, outside of the draft in itself, but, I mean, who knows? Like, they talked about the draft early on when they had announced the Overwatch League, and obviously that didn't happen, nor did, the Combine, that they were hyping up, so who knows? As Nander said, never say never, but, I'm sure they might be open to the idea. Maybe we should, tweet that out. But, there's a lot of stuff going on right now within the community, so let's go ahead and jump into our hot community topics for this past week. So, let's start off by, talking about Brigitte again. So, Overwatch Newest Hero, as we had mentioned, is playable right now, but not in ranked play, and Brigitte won't be playable in competitive mode until Season 10. So we do know that Season 10 of competitive is at least a month away still. And there's been a lot of complaints from the community in regards to the wait, and, our game director, our dad and savior, Papa Jeffy Cap, praise him, had addressed, the feedback in a recent forum post, saying that we made this change with the best intentions, as we frequently heard complaints from players that we were introducing new heroes to competitive play too quickly. So the team are looking to kind of reevaluate the approach when it comes to heroes to competitive play here in the future with future releases, but prior, new heroes were typically left out of competitive mode for about a week, which was about the same as how they were handling, new maps when they were released. And it wasn't until Blizzard World came out that Blizzard began to delay this new release when it came to competitive mode. So, principal designer Scott Mercer had said, like, the delayed release is basically supposed to give us, like, a stronger, season identity. And I don't know where you fall on this, but, like, a month plus to me seems like way too much time in regards to a delayed release.
I am completely opposite of what you just said. I love the fact that she's not in competitive until the next season. Mainly because no matter what you say, you're not good at her yet. You're just not. There's no way you can be comp level ready with this player in a week. It's just it's not possible unless you play like 12 to 14 hours a day for a week straight. It's just not gonna happen. So I mean, it's one of those things where I can see people being upset because they want her in there. They want the new hotness. But give it time. Give it some time. Like a month is not that long to not have her in comp. And you're gonna be happy about it because if you're not the person playing her in comp, you're gonna despise having her on your team in comp because, like I said, most people don't know how to play her. And so they're gonna run in, they're gonna just flail around, die quickly, be like, I'm top in healing. Well, yes, you could be, but you're not playing her right. And it's just, she's very much a team-oriented support. Like a team has to be built around her, like especially her ult, because you want to hit her ult before you go into the fight. Well, I mean, the majority of people are going to hit it like during the fight. Well, people aren't getting the benefit of that if you just hit it during the fight and there's just you and the Reinhardt being affected by it, or you and the one other tank next to you. So I like that they're not going to include her till season 10. I want them to stick with this with all the hero releases. Wait till the next season. Let Reddit blow up because Reddit blows up over everything, and then just have a good time. You know, go into just keep the 6v6 no limit Brigitte kill fest out there for everyone to work with her. You know, have people insta lock her in quick play for a month and let people have fun that way.
I mean, that's a fair point, but at the end of the day, when it comes to the latter, people are going to complain about someone regardless of when they were released. So really, that's kind of a moot point. But, you know, I do understand, like, they just want more time for people to get familiar with them, just like learning the maps and knowing, you know, the layout and the flank routes and where the health packs are and all of that stuff. But I feel like as players, I think a lot of it just comes down to the fact that when we enter a meta shift that people don't really like, they want to get out of it sooner rather than later, and Brigitte, you know, kind of being the person that is going to create a lot of space to deal with these flankers, is going to be the thing that could effectively kill off Dive, which I know, like, a lot of people aren't too fond of currently in the meta, so I think it's more that than anything, and that's why we're seeing the majority of the complaints coming out. But, I mean, like, 4 weeks, I mean, it is a long time. I don't think it's, like, a drastic amount of time, but, like, I think 2 or 3 weeks delay would suffice as well, but, you know, who knows? Brigitte, though, is just going to be a game changer, you know, as Kaplan said, but the thing is just, like, is it just going to effectively kill off the Dive, or is it just going to kind of be the heroes that you switch to in order to, you know, make the other team swap off of Dive? So we don't know exactly how things are going to be laid out here whenever this meta shift does happen.
Yeah, and the other thing is you know, Lovapunk in chat, you know, pointing this out. I mean, not all new characters are OP in comp or in the game, but a lot of characters when they first come out have bugs and stuff that, you know, you not everyone's like, oh, they're on the PTR. Well, a lot of people go on the PTR and play them. They don't report back any bugs or report stuff. They just go on and play. So a lot of stuff goes by unnoticed. Right. So, you know, a good 2-week span of like seeing any bugs, anything that's screwed up with her in quick play is a good way. It won't affect comp that way. So you can, you know, see how she plays for 2 weeks, see exploits, see bugs that may happen, and then you can fix them, and then you can bring her into comp without any, you know, hiccups.
Right.
So.
Yep, definitely. So, you know, we still gotta wait and see how the meta is gonna shift. Maybe we'll get a better idea, you know, next month when she does enter competitive play. Or, you know, whenever she does hit the Overwatch League or Contenders, all that good stuff. But speaking of the Overwatch League, you know, this is kind of like a repercussion of the XQC drama-filled induced weeks that we did have, and it comes to memes. So, you know, this is something that we kind of talked about from one of our other hot topics. And the Overwatch League has reached out to dissuade the use of the Pepe meme. So they released a quote. They said, the Overwatch League discourages the use of symbols and imagery which are associated with or used by hate groups, including Pepe the Frog. At Blizzard Arena, it's our policy that fans comply with this policy. We likewise ask the same of Overwatch League teams and players on their social media accounts. So, people have been bringing in signs with Pepe, and they have been getting confiscated at the Blizzard Arena. And, Sinatra, he had posted a tweet on his birthday that contained a Pepe image, and the league made him delete the tweet. And we've even seen players, going back into their, Twitter logs and deleting references and usage of the Pepe image in itself. So, Pepe was originally a cartoon character that was created by an artist, Matt Fury, but, he wasn't appropriated by a group until, 2015, when it was picked up by the alt-right. So, it was added, Pepe itself was added to the database of hate symbols back in 2016, but, when it comes to memes, not all uses of the meme are used for hate, basically. And, this comes not long after the Tryhard 7 emote debate that kind of sparked due to the whole XQC suspension and eventual release from Dallas Fuel, so, what's going on right now? Are the Overwatch League just, walking on eggshells right now, given the fact that, XQC brought a lot of drama to the league?
Yeah. Alright. The Pepe thing is, I think, 100, not 100, 90% the fault of XQC. They can't, Pepe is, yes, he was used by an alt-right group. Everyone knows that Pepe is not, the poster child or the mascot for the alt-right groups. Nobody in their right mind actually thinks that. It's just the fact that it was used by them, and they can't be seen, not punishing people for using Pepe as even if it has nothing to do with anything racist or anything related, they have to get rid of it because of what they did to XQC.
Mm-hmm.
And if they wouldn't do it to anyone else because of this, and they punish XQC could really come down hard on the Overwatch League. He really could. He could come back, and I'm not saying he's going to sue them, but he would have a right to get back into the league. He could have his suspension overturned. Yeah, all sorts of things could happen. So I think their hand is forced in this issue, even though it's stupid. I'm sorry. Just because of a group is using something as a mascot or used it as something as innocent as Pepe, nobody is using Pepe in the Overwatch League as to support alt-right groups. They're just not. It's unfortunate it's come to this. It's the world we live in now, where everything could. They could honestly take a picture of Sinatra and use it in an alt-right group, and Overwatch League would probably blank out his face during the Overwatch League streams because of fear that the alt-right groups, would be supporting them. And that's just that's the era we live in now. As stupid as it sounds, it's something that, an organization like the Overwatch League has to take into account. And by taking away Pepe signs or anything like that, they're just trying to protect their brand. With XQC, the Tryhard emote. On its own, Tryhard emote is not a racist emote. It's just not. Even Malik had said it's not. But when used in certain contexts, it is. So literally any Twitch emote can be used to be made offensive. Some people are offended by the Dallas Fuel logo. Mainly Dallas Fuel fans are offended by the Dallas Fuel logo.
Some people are just offended by how they're doing.
Yeah. So, but it's one of those things where they're just trying to protect their brand, and they're probably just literally, we have to send out a memo about not using Pepe. That's not something in the job description. The person who gets hired who had to send that out be like, you will have to regulate the use of Pepe memes on players' Twitter accounts.
Yeah, which is something else I want to point out is the fact that we have Overwatch League teams out there that specifically went out of their way to hire a meme specialist, and now you were taking away, one of the many tools of their job. So you were, effectively like cutting their legs off from underneath them and taking away hard work from these people. But the next thing that we got to talk about is kind of, it's kind of like on the same level of absurdity, I would say.
Oh, God.
So this is a very bizarre incident that happened here this past week, and I'm going to start off by saying that, one, I didn't know that esports was becoming a contact sport, but apparently it has been. So basically there was an incident here during halftime of a match between the Houston Outlaws and the Los Angeles Gladiators. And the gist of it is that the Gladiators head coach, D-Pay, accidentally bumped into two of the Outlaws players. That was Jake and Muma. And he went on to the LA Gladiators website, which, is part of the Overwatch League website, since all of them have their own team site. And he released a statement saying that yesterday, during the Outlaws match, I inadvertently bumped into two of the Outlaws players. I hadn't been watching where I was going. I was distracted, thinking about what to say to our team for Kane's Row, but I wanted to apologize immediately. I apologize to their players immediately after the game, and Tyron, who is their coach, shortly thereafter. I'm sincerely sorry for my actions and assure you that there was no malicious intent. Even though it was an accident, it was still unprofessional of me to shoulder bump players from another team. So again, I am sorry. So, okay. When I first read this, my gut reaction was, is this some sort of joke? Like, I read this, and, we talked about, like, all the TMZ-esque drama that has been basically, like, a focal point of the league. No one's really talking about the league in itself, but what's going on around the league that is just getting to, like, new levels of PC culture, essentially. And I think at the end of the day, mentioning that, people are kind of walking on eggshells due to the XQC incident that occurred, but, like, here's what I think what happened is, when you're... I'm assuming, like, when you're backstage at the arena, maybe Bob will have a better idea since he's been in, like, the press area and things like that. I would imagine, like, the backstage area is kind of like high school halls. There's a lot of a lot of moving parts going on, a lot of people going back and forth, a lot of commotion going on, and, stuff like this can just happen. Someone might not be looking and then they bump into someone, really no big deal, but... like, if you're someone that's there backstage, I would have a feeling like, well, maybe someone can misread the situation and then kind of blow it out of proportion. So for me, I just kind of took this as, well, he didn't want, like, someone else to, like, fabricate some sort of story and start, like, spreading, like, these malicious intent rumors about how the Gladiators were trying to, like, enforce their will by, like, trying to intimidate some of the Outlaws players, or anything, like, silly like that. But, like, the whole thing just made me scratch my head and kind of, like, raise my eyebrow, because, like, this just, like... I didn't get the need for the apology in itself.
I mean, raise your hand if you actually think this was an accident. Oh, yeah, no. I don't think it was an accident. I also don't think it was malicious. I think it was just kind of one of those, kind of like, all right, just gonna bump into their shoulder, be like, yeah, I'm here type of things. So I don't think it was an accident, but I do think it sounds like when I read it, I heard like what I got from it was it was more of a preemptive strike. Like, that's how I saw it. It's like, it's one of those, I'm gonna deny this before anyone can refute what I say. Like, I'm going to put out a denial. I'm going to put out, like, this is what happened before somebody else can go out there and put out their own story. And he went with the accident because there's no way to prove that wasn't an accident unless for some reason somebody had it on videotape, which I highly unlikely somebody would have it on videotape. But, like, it's just one of those things where, honestly, if he wasn't... I mean, if somebody wasn't about to report on this, then there would be no statement from them. None whatsoever. Because it would be a non-issue. But somebody's probably reporting it, like you said, TMZ style. And
yeah, Reddit was reporting it.
Yeah. The most trustworthy site on the
Yes.
internet.
It's up there with Fox News.
Yeah, Fox News, Reddit, Pornhub, the most trustworthy of sites. It's like they released a statement before somebody else could. That's how I saw it. I don't believe that it was an accident. I don't believe it was malicious. I just think it was kind of one of those, like you said, a high school shoulder bump. And there's no reason to read into it. It's just funny that they released a ridiculous statement like this. Like this was like, if you've ever read a forced confession, this is what it would be like. Like the owners were like, write a confession, apologize, say it was an accident, but it would just do it. And then this is what comes out. So.
Yep, I'm sure next week it'll be something completely new with intimidation factors. But, speaking of the league, let's go ahead and talk about what we saw last week in the league. So, looking at the results on Wednesday, we saw the Boston Uprising sweep the Dallas Fuel 4-0. The New York Excelsior took Seoul Dynasty to another Game 5, and New York Excelsior took that one 3-2. Philadelphia Fusion defeated the struggling, more so than the Dallas Fuel, Shanghai Dragons 4-0. And it didn't get any better for Shanghai, because on Thursday they got swept by New York Excelsior 4-0. Florida Mayhem defeated the Los Angeles Valiant 3-1. We had the LA Gladiators defeat the Houston Outlaws 3-2. On Friday, we saw LA Gladiators defeat Florida Mayhem 2-1. The London Spitfire 3-1 the San Francisco Shock. And the Boston Uprising defeated the LA Valiant 3-1. And then to cap off the week, we had the London Spitfire 4-0 the Seoul Dynasty. We had the Shock 3-1 the Houston Outlaws, and then the Fusion swept the Dallas Fuel. So, takeaways from this past week. Let's start off with one of the bigger ones. The LA Gladiators have been showing their flexibility. So, they are riding a pretty high streak, picking up big wins and, staying in that playoff hunt for Stage 2. Obviously, Stage 2 playoffs are this weekend, and are still in the hunt. And, we talked about the addition of Fisher and how this team has been basically just playing with more confidence as ever, and their DPS has been firing pretty much on all cylinders at this point. They haven't really showed that much signs of slowing down. So, this past week, though, we really got to see that flexibility kind of come into play. And there was one map in particular that really solidifies that, and it was against the Outlaws when they went to a map 5, and they played on Ilios. When they went to Ruins, which is, traditionally, the Widowmaker map, the Gladiators threw out one of the weirdest looking compositions I've ever seen when it came to the roles that people were playing. So, yes, they had Fisher and Bishu playing on the tank line, but everything else was kind of like swapped around. We had
heroes.
We had Hydration, who is, normally their projectile DPS. He was playing support on Lucio, and he was single support on the team. We had Asher, who normally plays the Tracer. He was playing the Widowmaker. And then they had both of their support players playing DPS because they had Big Goose, the Goose being loose over on the Sombra. And Shaz, who traditionally plays Zenyatta, was playing Tracer. So, what? When I saw this coming out, I'm like, there is absolutely no way this is going to work. It worked!
It worked. So, I actually read an interview with Big Goose, and they asked him about that specific map. Mm-hmm. And he's like, honestly, it's something we practice. He's like, as weird as it sounds, it's something we practice to kind of, and it makes sense. It's kind of like the trick play in football. It's like, you practice this, and it's only going to work once, maybe twice, because it takes your opponent so off guard that it works. And they just pulled it off in the perfect situation. Yeah, it was, I just, once I saw Big Goose on Sombra, I'm like, all right, this is going to be interesting. I'm like, okay, so Shaz, Asher's one of the better Tracers in the league, but he's not playing Tracer. Their support's playing Tracer. All right, this is going to be an interesting match. And then it worked out, but I think it worked out because they were playing Outlaws, and the Outlaws have been struggling.
Even with a support Tracer.
Yeah, it's like, is it like that brings up the question, like, is it so crazy that they did this, or was it so crazy that the Houston Outlaws couldn't stop a support playing Tracer?
Yeah, and the thing that, like, the other thing too was, like, the Outlaws weren't losing the Widowmaker duel either. You know, Linkser was getting the better of Asher on the Widow as well, but, you know, the Gladiators still ended up, you know, pulling this one out. But, like, I love seeing something like this because, you know, we have seen, like, some of these surprise tactics, and we did see one in the Seoul London game, which I'll talk about when we talk about that one. But, you know, it's just, like, another layer of adaptability that we just haven't seen from the Gladiators yet, and I love that we got to see something completely new and different and so off-putting about this team, and it actually, you know, work. So, that was pretty cool to see. So, you know, speaking of Houston, you know, Houston's problems go beyond Tracer, and I'll tell you why. So, I mean, Flame has come out outright say, we don't have a Tracer problem, we have a Tracer player. They have, like, 3 on the team, basically. And they've all been kind of middle of the ground, but, like, getting outclassed pretty much by the majority of the teams anyway, within the Overwatch League. But I would say, like, their Tracer play has been serviceable at times, but it's far from, you know, the other teams in the league. But basically, when it comes down to it, the Outlaws are practicing a hero that they just haven't put that much time into, and they just aren't comfortable with Tracer. But more concerning to me isn't their Tracer play in itself, it's how they are dealing with opposing Tracers. So basically what we're seeing is the enemy Tracer is tearing apart the Outlaws' backline. They are farming their pulse bombs off of Cool Mat, they are demeching Cool Mat, and then basically, you know, their opposition has a 5v6, you know, in their favor. So the thing that is really throwing me off is the Outlaws are basically a team that likes to study the enemy. They like to build their strategies around whatever specialist, you know, their opponents have. But the problem is that hasn't been coming across. It's not how they've been executing their game plans here lately. And I feel like part of that is just due to the fact that they're very stubborn, because, you know, we've seen times where they opt to run a Lucio against a Mercy this stage, rather than running a Mercy of their own, and it just doesn't work out. Like, it's been kind of the same thing with Raucus when he's playing on the Sombra, where he's not switching when he needs to. But, like, I feel like the Outlaws have basically just been hitting the same nail in the wall, when it's already driven deep into the wall, and it's just... They need to come up with something other than, okay, we're just going to try to out-Tracer the other team, or try to mimic another Tracer player style when they're not going to have the same mechanical skill or the same composure as some of the elite Tracers in the league. But, like, to say Tracer is the only problem with the Outlaws right now, I think is, you know, a little silly at this current point.
It's a little silly. I think them not having a is definitely hurting them. I think one thing I saw on, like, the pregame that they do, which is half informative, half brutal to watch, they were talking about the Tracer problems with Houston. And, you know, they had Clockwork stats up there for the previous, you know, weekend where he played Tracer the whole time. And they said he was in every category of people who played Tracer, he was the third worst in every category: kills, damage, all the statistical categories that they track. And they're just like, yeah, that's hurting them, but like you said, it's also hurting them that they can't stop a Tracer. Like, I think this is a product of their own doing, because they have characters, they have great players. I mean, Jake and Linkser are great DPS. So I'm not going to deny that. But they're not what they need right now. Linkser is the one who's going to always be in the lineup. I don't think Jake fits into this lineup right now. Because, I mean, we've seen him on Tracer. We saw Linkser on Tracer. We've seen Clockwork on Tracer. It's like, if anyone's going to get subbed out, it's going to be Jake. And you bring Jake in for his soldier play, his Junkrat play, and Junkrat's even getting less play. I think it's one of those, we have 6 great players. And one of those players just doesn't fit the meta right now. But how do you bench a great player? Well, they kind of have to. And, you know, I will say this over and over again. I don't think... I'm not joining the free Mendo club, but I think he at least deserves a shot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's played Tracer a lot. He's worth a shot. You're not making the playoffs. Why not at least play him on a map or two? Get him some experience. See how he does going up against other teams on the big stage, something like that. Put Jake on the bench for a match. As hard as it sounds for Outlaw fans and for, you know, fans of Overwatch, the Overwatch League, it's probably best for the team to try out these new things, because if they don't, then people are going to start calling for them to, you know, pick somebody up or trade for somebody in the week off between, you know, stages. And I think the best thing they can do is at least give Mendo a shot at this point.
Yeah, and to that point, like, they did just face the Shanghai Dragons, and for me, like, that was a perfect scenario to really give Mendo Kusai an opportunity to play. And I know, like, Mendo in the past has been super inconsistent, and that's why there's a lot of concern about, like, how he's going to do in the Overwatch League. But, like, you won't know if you don't give him the chance to play. So, you know, I think that was the perfect conditions to play him. They didn't go that route, but... You know, I just feel like they just can't make up their mind with what to do regarding Tracer. So, you know, maybe, you know, Jake will improve enough mechanically to be able to, you know, match the numbers of some of the other mid-tier Tracers in the league. But for now, it just seems like that is one of the more glaring holes, both, you know, running it and going against it. But, you know, speaking of someone that is... definitely finding holes in someone's game, and that is the London Spitfire. When you compare them to my other dads of the Seoul Dynasty, so London is basically, at the end of the day, I've said it before, I'll say it again, London is the Dynasty's kryptonite. Okay, so going back a little bit, you know, here's a little history lesson in competitive Overwatch. So this kind of dates back to Apex, when, you know, Dynasty were under the name Lunatic High. So the core of that Dynasty roster have lost 4 consecutive series against the London Spitfire core, which does consist of GC Busan. So, during those 4 losses, Dynasty have lost all 16 maps that these teams have played against one another. So, what makes London so good against the Dynasty, as opposed to, you know, how some of the other teams fare against Seoul, which hasn't always been that great? Well, you can look at it 2 ways. So, you know, yes, they're able to consistently defeat the Dynasty, but the Seoul have been able to split the series against New York Excelsior, who are the other Korean juggernaut. But if you look at the stylistic difference between New York and London, you have 2 completely different approaches to the game of Overwatch. Spitfire play the far more aggressive Korean style. New York is more passive. They have a much more similar approach to the Dynasty take, basically. And because of that, Seoul is able to have more time to adjust to what is being thrown at them. Whereas, on the other hand, you have London, who plays hyper-aggressive, and on top of that, they have probably the highest adaptability when it comes to, you know, team strategies and how to counteract what the opponent is doing. And, you know, I mentioned this earlier, but there was a key moment in that series, kind of like the LA Gladiators versus Houston Outlaws, where they pulled out, like, this tech strat, basically, that completely threw Seoul Dynasty off guard, and it came on Hanamura. This was after both teams had completed Hanamura twice. So this was on the 3rd attack for the Seoul Dynasty, and London had put up, you know, 6 objective points on Hanamura at this point, so it was up to Seoul to try to match that when they really had, like, no time at all, because it was the 3rd time big. So basically what happened is, you know, on Hanamura you have, like, that main, like, like ramen shop. I don't know what the heck they call it. I can't remember. But
The
the one
ramen
that's like
shop. Let's
the
go
one,
with that.
the one that's right by, the major choke point, right?
Yeah.
So to the left of that, when you were looking at the spawn door, like at the start of the map for the attackers, there are, some boxes and some bushes.
The
So
bushes. Yeah.
yeah, basically what they did is they put Libero and Zibiobi and they hit them in the bushes. They were tactical crouching, so you couldn't really see them. And then, Soul comes in, and then they dive the back line. And it completely falls apart for Soul, and then it was done at that point. But it's things like that, like, when you're able to throw different looks on each attack, and then them all work, is something that not a lot of teams can do, and actually, we haven't seen that level of adaptability from the other Overwatch League teams. So London is kind of like, that's like their go-to at this point. They play aggressive, they adapt on the fly, and whatever they throw at you ends up working out 100%. So, they have taken every map off of this Dynasty core, and if these two teams are going to meet in the stage playoffs, I'm very hesitant to give Dynasty a map, as much as that pains me to say it, but, London is, they have one of the better defenses, and, they can just adapt better than most of the other teams, and for whatever reason, Seoul just can't figure out how to match London. So, do you think Seoul is going to be able to turn things around at some point against London this season, or do you think that this is just a case of, London just simply having Seoul's number?
I think it's more leaning towards London has Soul's number. And the reason I say this, it's one of those things, at a certain point, it gets in their head. Like, it's in Soul's head, shit, we're going up against London again. We're gonna lose. And you're like, we're gonna put in a good effort, but in the back of your mind, you're like, all right, they've destroyed us literally every time we play each other. I mean, there's nothing, it's so London is in Soul's head. And from all the matches I've seen from Soul, I think you can get into their heads pretty easily. Maybe not the players' heads, but the coaches' heads. And they overthink things and they make weird substitutions. They're like, oh, what if we throw this at them? We'll throw this at them. And then, they start overthinking. And the players are just following what their coaches tell them to do. And I think London is at that point where they just mentally they own Seoul. I think Seoul is more skilled than London. I think on a player-by-player basis, I think Seoul is the most skilled team in the Overwatch League. It's just, I think London just owns them. It's as bad as that sounds, or London, because we've seen London fall to teams they shouldn't have, and they bounce back against Seoul. Like, usually your bounce back team is going up against the Shock, Mayhem, Dragons, Fuel, and London's bounce back team is Seoul. So I mean, yeah, until Seoul can, get London out of their heads, I think London.
Yeah, I mean, it is worth noting, though, the first time that these two teams had played in the Overwatch League, Seoul wasn't able to put up map points until the last map. They put up 2 points, basically, on the fourth map. But in this series, they did put up more points overall, but, they still didn't win any of the maps. So it was an improvement in that regard, but still, they haven't come out with a map win against London. So, I don't know, if these two teams do face off in the playoffs, it's really hard for me to root for one team over the other since I own both of their merchandise, so I'm still going to be supporting both teams no matter what. But it does pain me a little bit knowing that, one of my teams does have my other team's number, and I want to see Seoul bounce back and just get one win. Even if it's one map win, or taking them to a Game 5, that would be a win in their own right, because they really just need to get them out of their heads at this point, because, it's definitely concerning for that team, knowing that London's just able to basically just walk all over them at this point.
Like, the Seoul Dynasty are becoming that I've said it before, they're becoming the lovable loser. Like, they're super skilled, but they get to that point, but they can't take that last step. Like, they're so good, it's like, I make a lot of different sports analogies, but it's what's most common is if you watch the NFL, think of the Buffalo Bills in the 90s. Went to 4 straight Super Bowls, lost 4 straight Super Bowls. Like, that is the Seoul Dynasty right now. Like,
Yeah,
they have the skill
or like
they have the skill to get there. They just need to get over that hump, and I don't know when they're going to get over that hump. But once they do, I think they're going to go just domination style. But they have to get to that point, and right now they're not going to do that because, I mean, they're not even. I mean, it's the last week of stage 2. Almost called it season 2, stage 2. It's they don't have a lock on a playoff spot.
Nope.
They're behind New York and London.
Yeah, those are pretty much secured too.
Yeah, those are pretty much secured. Like, Seoul is the one where, like, if you don't win both matches, things are not looking good for you.
Right. And that's true for the other teams that are also in playoff contention, which are the LA Gladiators and the Philadelphia Fusion. All right, so speaking of which, as we mentioned, like, this is a playoff week, and we had games yesterday, games today. We'll talk about those games tomorrow, or not tomorrow, but I mean, you and I will talk about them tomorrow, but we'll talk about them on the show next week. But let's go ahead and break down the matches that are happening on Friday and Saturday. So on Friday, speaking of Seoul, they are opening up Friday against your team, the Florida Mayhem. So Edinar, what are you expecting out of this match between the Dynasty and the Mayhem, given the fact that, the Dynasty are still in the playoff hunt, and the Mayhem are coming in with quite a bit of momentum given their recent performances?
Yeah. All right, so the Mayhem, honestly, should be coming into this be on a 3-game win streak. They should be. They lost to the Gladiators. I think they lost it themselves last week.
Mm-hmm.
But they should have won that map, and they should be riding a 3-0 win streak coming into this match. And I'm not calling for the Mayhem to win. I don't think the Mayhem are going to win. I'm not that delusional. But I think they can make a match of it. I think you're looking at a Seoul Dynasty win, and I'm thinking 3-2, 2-1 type of thing. I think Florida's going to really put the pressure on. And I guess that all depends on when the match starts, if Seoul is still in the hunt or if they've clinched or, anything like that. But I think it's going to come down to a 3-2, 2-1 type of thing. And Mayhem are going to take a map, tie a map, or win 2 maps off of Seoul.
All right, well, moving on to 6 p.m. Pacific time, we have Philadelphia Fusion going up against the LA Valiant. So Philly is another one of those teams that are in playoff contention with Seoul and the LA Gladiators. So, there seems to be a pretty big divide amongst the community when it comes to the DPS core of the Fusion. When it comes to, well, who are you going to run? I think all of their DPS across the board has proven to be, pretty serviceable. Snillo we've seen more recently, but, EQO, Carpe, and Shadowburn have, collectively all been pretty solid overall. So that's really, like, the biggest question mark when it comes to Fusion. Well, who are they going to be fielding on the DPS core? And when you look at that, I think the most consistent out of all of those players has been Carpe. Carpe plays the Widow, he plays the Tracer, and we all know how important Tracer is in our current meta, and I think it's really going to be him that's going to be the ultimate difference in this series. I think, they already played the spoiler for LA Gladiators earlier in the week, and, if they win, they have a pretty good shot at maybe potentially even taking that number 3 seed and going up against London in the stage playoffs. But, I think the DPS core of the Fusion will be the difference maker in this one off of the back of Carpe. And I don't think that Soon is going to have as good of a showing, just knowing the amount of pressure that he's going to be under from Carpe. So in this series, I have Fusion taking this one over the Valiant with the score of 3-1. But moving on at 8 p.m. Pacific time, we do have the London Spitfire going up against the Shanghai Dragons, fielding their 2 Korean players. So Edinar, are you expecting anything outside of a 4-0 for London in this one? Or, can the Dragons potentially turn things around, given a little bit more practice time?
All right, so I think I don't think it's going to be a 4. And not because I think Shanghai is going to be all of a sudden like super, super serious. I think it's going to go more along the lines of London is essentially going to have, I mean, London has the most cakewalk walk into the playoffs last week with their match against Shanghai, the 2 worst teams in the Overwatch League. So, I mean, I think London is going to go more along the lines of maybe resting certain players. And as weird as that sounds, there's good strategy behind it because, I mean, look at what happened to them in last stage. You know, like
yeah, they won.
They won, but like their players were burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
And I know they're adding the playoffs to Sunday instead of having a 20-hour freaking Overwatch League marathon on Saturday. But I think resting them for a day because when they go to the playoffs, they have the potential of playing Friday, Saturday, 2 games Sunday.
Right.
I think it would be smart if they would sit certain people. I mean, not the whole team, because I mean, you're gonna win. You're gonna win, but you could sit people like Prophet. You could sit people like Ring for like maybe even all 4 maps, depending on how it goes. You know, and rest them so they're not in, you know, a 4-day marathon Overwatch League tournament. So I see London winning 3-1 on this one. I think Shanghai will take 1 map off of them because they're going to be playing up against backups, essentially, in some of the maps. And whether it happens in this match or, you know, the next matchup we're talking about, I think it will happen.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, if I was in London, I don't think I would rest them for an entire series. Maybe they split it in each series. That way, you know, they're still playing each day, but they're not practicing for, you know, like 6 to 8 maps or anything ludicrous like that. But, you know, speaking of London, on Saturday, they actually kick things off at 1 p.m. Pacific time when London Spitfire take on the Dallas Fuel. Okay, so London, on paper, are by far the heavy favorites in this series. You know, Dallas are coming in looking worse than they ever have been, hence me calling them Dumpster Fire earlier. That's their new DF initials. The communication issues have been absolutely plaguing this team. You know, regardless of roster departures, players struggling on newer roles, Mickey being kind of torn on who to peel for and who to protect. I don't know if we'll actually see that at an R, but, you know, to each their own. But I feel like London in this series is going to field some of that GC Busan core of their roster to rest some of their players, like you had mentioned, for the playoffs, just because that is a done deal. I mean, they're going to be in no matter basically how these next 2 matches go, just based off of their map differential and whatnot. And, I mean, they should still win both of these series. But, like, Dallas, in order for them to really stand a chance, they need to have the tank line having, you know, better communication when it comes to the dive. They need to be better at positioning, which Taimu has not been great at because he keeps getting picked off early. And they just need better communication overall. And the chances of one of those 3 happening is decent. It's not great, but the likelihood of all 3 of those things happening and just coming together in 1 week against one of the top teams in the league is completely far-fetched. And I don't think Dallas is going to take a map. I think this will be 4-0 for London, regardless of who is getting fielded by the Spitfire. And, you know, London is going to look to, you know, reclaim their stage championship, since, you know, they did win stage 1. But moving on, at 3 p.m. Pacific time, we have the LA Valiant going up against the other Korean juggernaut in the New York Excelsior. So, Edinar, you know, Valiant, very inconsistent. They either, you know, 4-0 someone, or they get 4-0'd, so is this week going to be any different?
Depends. And again, this match all depends on how the Spitfire do, because New York presently is in that top spot, so they get that bye essentially in the playoffs, because the 2nd and 3rd seed play each other. They play, whoever wins that plays the 1 seed. So New York wants to obviously hold on to that that 1 seed.
Well, they're up like 6 maps in the differential right now.
Exactly. And that's why it all depends on the Spitfire. If the Spitfire go 4-0, 4-0 in their 2 maps that they have, and depending on the match New York would legit have to lose 4-0. Yeah, no, that's not happening. I'm trying to do math in my head and it's just not working. I mean, I see New York winning 3-1 or 4-0, one of the two. I think the same thing's going to happen with them. They might rest some people, depending on how the map differential is and stuff like that, just to, give. I don't think they're going to do a full rest on some of their players.
Well, they can't rest their DPS.
Yeah, true, because their other DPS won't play because he's not feeling it. So, I just think they're just gonna rotate out. They're gonna win 3-1 or 4-0, take first place, and then face either the Spitfire, probably the Spitfire in the championship game.
All right, well, capping off the week. I mean, for the regular part of the stage, I should say, because we do have matches on Sunday. We have the Boston Uprising going against the LA Gladiators. Okay, so Gladiators, as we mentioned, they are going to. I mean, they already know, like, going into this match, they are still in playoff contention based off of what happened today, which, I'll get into that some other time. But, okay, so looking at Boston Uprising, this is a team that, during Stage 1, they probably, like, you could argue that Boston had the best dive in the Overwatch League during Stage 1. But during Stage 2, that's not really been the case because, Kelix, being one of their support players, he did really well on the Mercy meta, but he is not adapted well. He does not have his rollerblades underneath him on Lucio. He has been the weakness of this team throughout the stage, and due to this, they just haven't looked like the same team. So I'm looking for the Gladiators to come in. They are going to control this series based off of the aggression by Fisher, who has really been the glue that is holding this team together. Because with Fisher, like, being able to play aggressive and really deal and expose that support line of the Uprising, that is going to open up the space for the DPS. And we've seen what the Gladiators DPS can do with their flexibility. Just with being able to play more aggressive, they just look like completely different of a team. So I expect Gladiators to win this one. I think Boston might be able to take a map, but I'm looking at a 3-1 for Gladiators, and who makes the playoffs? I don't know. Today kind of threw a wrench in everything, so we still have 3 teams in contention going into these final 2 days. So with that in mind, Edinar, we do know on Sunday, with the new playoff structure, we do have, the seed 2 and the seed 3, fighting for the right to take on the top seed, which in more than all likelihood is going to be the New York Excelsior, given their current schedule. They are playing right now. They're facing the Dallas Fuel, and then, they do play the Valiant, which is another, pretty easy matchup for them. So 99% chance I say New York is going to get that top seed again, but I just want to get your thoughts. Who do you think is going to come out with the seed 2 and seed 3, and ultimately, who do you think will be playing in the finals for stage 2?
Okay, so knowing that, unfortunately for you, the Seoul Dynasty may have just knocked themselves out of contention against the Houston Outlaws. I'm going with, obviously, New York 1, London Spitfire 2, and just doing, it's fairly simple math. If Philadelphia wins against the Valiant on Friday, they essentially have it clinched. What would have to happen is Philly would have to win 3-1 or 3-2, and the Gladiators would have to 4-0 the Boston Uprising, and it would be a tie. And I don't know how the tiebreaker would work. I don't know, do you know that? If they have the same map record. Because right now, the Gladiators are one map behind.
Yeah, Fusion has 1 map over the Gladiators, and then it would go based off of if they played each other prior.
So then it would be the Fusion. Because Fusion what? Yeah, Fusion beat them last week. Unless I'm losing my mind. Yeah, no, they didn't play them last week. When did they play each other
It was
last?
it was no, it was like week 5. It was yesterday.
Oh, it was yesterday.
Yeah.
And Fusion won.
Yep, 3-1.
So essentially, they need if Philadelphia wins, they're in. That's basically how it has to be. Mathematically, if Fusion beat Valiant, they're in the playoffs, and I think that's going to happen. So I think it's going to be London Spitfire versus the Fusion for the play-in match against New York. I think London Spitfire is going to win that rather easily, and I think Excelsior are going to beat them.
Yeah, so when you look at the playoff picture right now, basically what needs to happen is for the Fusion, they either need to win 4-0 or a 3-1, but the Gladiators, they need help to kind of get that last one. Gladiators really need to get a 4-0 in their series against Boston, which, Boston is kind of like one of those trap teams, essentially. Just because they can play extremely well, and then they could kind of play inconsistent. You really don't know what to expect, much like the Fusion at times. But Fusion, definitely, I think, out of the 3 right now, I mean, given what happened with the Houston Dynasty game today, Fusion is the one that is in the drive-in seat, and the Valiant, while they have been pretty inconsistent, I don't think that you could really favor the Valiant in that series, just based off of the DPS play that we have seen from the Fusion, so really, it's looking like Fusion will be that 3rd seed and going up against London. So, I'm trying to think, I'm looking back at the schedule, I'm trying to see if these teams have faced earlier in the stage. Okay, yes, they did. They played week 2, and the Spitfire 4-0'd the Fusion.
Yeah, I don't think the Fusion stand a chance.
Yeah, so this is what I look at it. So, let's say we get Seoul versus London. London is probably going to win. So it'll be London, New York. If the Gladiators face London, the Gladiators did upset London, so, there is a potential that we could see LA versus New York. But I think at the end of the day, you have to favor Fusion to win that 3rd seed. But I just think London is going to be too much for these other teams to handle, given how consistently they have played and been able to just adapt to, so many different looks, and we just haven't seen that same level of, multitudes of layer from these other teams, so I have to give it to, London getting that 2nd seed, taking out the 3rd seed, regardless of who it is, and then they're gonna face off against New York, so that would leave us, Excelsior versus Spitfire, a rematch of the Stage 1 finals. So out of those 2 teams, who would you favor given the current meta? Do you think New York has adapted better than London, or is London's defense going to, bring that championship caliber back to the forefront and really just be able to handle that passiveness of the Excelsior?
I think Excelsior will. Yeah, I think New York will probably not roll over London, but I think they'll 3-1 them in the championship if it's up against London. If it's up against Philadelphia, I think they'll 4-0 them. I don't see a way that New York doesn't win Stage 2. They're calm, they're cool, they're collected. They don't have the the antics of Pine around. Who, like I've said before, I'm not a big fan of Pine, but it's just they don't have true weaknesses on their team. They may not be as strong as certain people in certain aspects of the team, but they are just they're the Patriots. They're literally the Patriots. Even though Boston's technically owned by the Patriots, they're the Patriots. They're the ones who are they're always going to be good no matter what. They're always going to be in the championship game or close to the championship game, and they're going to be the favorite every time they play in the championship game. I think London kind of surprised them in last stage. I also think Pine hurt them last stage in the championship game, and without him playing this time, I think they can play what they normally do. They can play their style of of Overwatch, and I think I'm going 3-1 4-0 in favor of New York, no matter who they play.
All right, well, I do think it will be New York taking on London, and I think this is going to be another very close series between these two teams. And I'm not going to take anything away from London's win in Stage 1, given how many maps they played in a very small window and not really having any time to rest, unlike New York, who kind of was lackadaisical and were just like, oh yeah, we just kind of like napped going into the finals. They're not gonna do the same thing over again. I think at the end of the day, what's gonna happen is New York is gonna be able to edge them off of, just their flexibility. I think overall, like Libero, when you compare him to the London DPS, we've seen more from him at a higher like tier based on the heroes that he is playing compared to London. But I'm not gonna sleep on London either. I think at the end of the day, Sabiolbi is going to outpace whoever London is playing on Tracer, who is more than likely going to be Prophet, because, Prophet's really, probably top 2, top 3 Tracers, behind Sabiolbi.
Behind Sabiolbi.
But Sabiolbi is, bar none, the best Tracer in the league and in the world, and he's been able to outperform every Tracer that he's been coming up across, not just in the World Cup, but in the Overwatch League. And you add in JJoNak on the Zenyatta, essentially being a third DPS, which opens up the possibility of picking up early picks and, just making a 5v6 immediately. And we've already seen what New York has been able to do without the man advantage. So I think it's going to be close. I think this one will go again to 5 games, but I think it will be New York taking this one 3-2. And, I picked London in Stage 1. They won that one. And, my other co-hosts on Overwatch League Network both picked New York, and, they're sticking with their guns. They're sticking with New York again. So, who knows? Maybe this will be it. Maybe we won't podcast curse them, just like the commentators and casters. But it should be a good series either way. But, who knows? Maybe Philadelphia will be able to somehow managed to beat one of the Korean teams to face New York, but, I'm excited either way. It is stage playoff time. I am hyped, and, that Boston-LA game is going to be a huge game, but really, guys, the game of the week, or games of the week, has to be the playoffs. Don't miss Sunday's games, because if the last stage was any indicator of how good these series are going to be, we're going to keep seeing even higher level of play and different looks and different strategies coming out of the woodwork that we just haven't seen prior, because teams are always holding on to something. So watch the games on Sunday. Let's get the viewer count skyrocketed, all that good stuff. But with that, let's go ahead and move to our community corner before we close out the show. So, Edinar, do you have any shoutouts this week? Because I know I have quite a few this week, because it's been a pretty busy week.
I don't really have any shout-outs this week. Other than my Overwatch comp teammates, a couple of guys that I play with, Kyle and Guy's Cool. I'm gonna give them a shout out because they've made comp less toxic for me this week. As hard as that is to imagine, they've made it less toxic for me this week. So, I'm going to give a shout out to them. And then I'm going to give a shout out to the Florida Mayhem again, because honestly, they are playing so good right now. If they're playing so good right now that if you told me they'd beat London Spitfire, without watching the match, if you're like, yeah, Mayhem pulled off a win against the Spitfire, I wouldn't be surprised. So I'm going to give a shout out to them every week until we get a team in Chicago or Milwaukee, and then all the shout outs go to them. So how about you? How about you, Totem?
Of course. First up, I want to shout out Watchpoint Radio. They had just released episode 100 of WPR, so shout outs to Ja and Bob for that. I know, I sent in something for them for, that episode 100 that was released, and really, Bob is still, I think he's still in his first year of podcasting, but, he's been a good friend, and, I've been trying to help him as he's, his new venture into podcasting, basically, and it's just, I love seeing the amount of growth that I've seen from these new podcasters, and it's really great to see, and really the podcast community is just one big family. We're always looking out for one another, and yeah, I mean, Jaw is just top of the class, really, when it comes to everything behind the scenes. And speaking of, the podcast family, we do have a new Overwatch podcast out there, so, new podcast alert, you guys gotta be on the lookout for Enter the Iris. This is from some community members that you might be familiar of if you've been attending any of the podcast game nights. This has Icy Sorrow, Rod Johnston, and Drunken Monk. And I know they had just released their first episode here earlier in the week, so be sure to show them some love and check out Enter the Iris. And, as I mentioned, I was on Around the Payload, which is part of High Noon Podcast. That is their Around the Horn type, debate/game show-esque thing where, we discuss different Overwatch League topics and then we argue our viewpoint on them. And, spoiler, I won.
Whoa. How did this happen?
Did
you pay someone?
No, I didn't have to pander to the Blevins like some past winners have had to do. So,
Are you calling out Spider?
maybe, and some other people.
A little bit.
Okay, at the end of the day, this is following second place finishes by my co-hosts on Overwatch League Network in Slambo and Spider. So I was going into this, a lot of pressure on me to take home the win, and in the end, I took home the W, giving me even more bragging rights over my co-hosts. I just want to thank the Blevins again for having me on, because, for a long time, we recorded this podcast on Tuesdays, which is when High Noon does Around the Payload. And, you would think, based off of, the 8 shows that, the two of us collectively do each week, and, all the Overwatch stuff that we're a part of, just viewing, esports, we would be able to find the time to, actually be able to schedule a podcast, but that's really not been the case. So, Tuesdays being open now allows me to guest over on that show in particular, and I had a lot of fun, and it was very interesting to talk with other community members and just have a completely different viewpoint from them. And I brought some fire with some of my answers, and I will leave it at that, so be sure to check that out. I did post the links in our Discord and on my Twitter. But that being said, Edinar, let's go ahead and close out the show, because we've been at it for
we talk
almost 2 hours. We talk. I mean, we are a podcast. We talk a lot. That's what we do, guys. And I'm sorry, it's been close to 2 hours. So let's go ahead and close things out. So, Edinar, why don't you go ahead and let everyone know where they can get a hold of us over on the internet and, email us, all the good stuff.
Okay. Let's see here. On email, you can reach us at hndoverwatch@gmail.com. On Twitter, you can reach us at @hndoverwatch. Obviously, we stream live on Twitch, so you can reach us at twitch.tv/OWLN show. Side note, we hit Twitch affiliate last week. So you can support the show by subscribing to our Twitch channel and unlock our network emoticon. So thanks again to everyone who's been watching the shows live. We appreciate the live, feedback, the banter. Blazing Bob coming in and spamming stuff.
Yeah, I gotta start doing that in his channel.
So if you do like to catch us live, we're on nights a week. So the Overwatch League Network is on Mondays at 7 p.m. Pacific. Overwatch League Network, the back cap, which follows the secondary scene, Contenders, is on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Pacific. Obviously, Heroes Never Die, the best of the 3, are on Thursday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific. And then we will be hosting a game night this Saturday at 7 p.m. Pacific. So join us for a fun night of community custom games. The game will be streamed live on our Twitch page.
Yep, and it's important to note that will be after the Overwatch League games on Saturday, because, that does kind of, go close to that time.
Yeah, and, I mean, obviously, we want to watch that, because the last match could have crazy implications. So, come join our discussions over at Discord, so discord.me/OWLN show. And then we are also on YouTube, where we post all our VODs, so Overwatch League Network. So we're getting close to our custom URL over there. If you could help us out, subscribing to our channel, we greatly appreciate it. All our podcast episodes and top plays and other videos can be found there. And by subscribing, we can get our custom, URL channel up there, so it's not like OverwatchLeagueNetwork.com/20 different numbers /4 letters / something or another. So go ahead and do that. You can follow me on Twitter at Ednar Overwatch. Totem, where can they find you?
Hold on, I'm laughing about something. All right. Well, you can find me. You can find me over on the Twitter. That is at Little Bluebird. Basically talking about comics, scary movies, Overwatch, esports, trolling Blazing Bob, things of that nature. That is over on Twitter at TotallyDrunkCTR. I also do not stream on my Twitch channel, but if you want to go there, you could check out like Passive Odds. That is over at twitch.tv/TotallyDrunk, or otherwise, you could just find me here, basically 3 nights a week, as I do 3 podcasts a week, all about Overwatch, all about the game that we love and love to watch esports of. But again, guys, that is going to do it for us here tonight on Heroes Never Die. Again, this has been episode 103. And man, is that getting a mouthful every time I say it, just because triple digits, I mean, that's something. And, congrats again to Watchpoint Radio. But guys, we will see you here on Saturday after the Overwatch League games for our community game night. Feel free to join us. Come play Brigitte and show us how it is done, and see if you can make an immediate impact with the new hero, at least in custom games. And who knows, maybe, you might be able to lock her instead of trying to fight 5 other people to lock her in quick play. But until then, guys, we will see you next week. Have a good night.
Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to Heroes Never Die. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HND
So that was
Overwatch
long.
and join us on Discord at discord.me/OWLN show.